Oli Olis, hi. Welcome to That the Dude in a Dress podcast. I'm Jose, also known as Jose Nahuan. So today, I figured I should have a palate cleanser like last week. Something spooky, but it's just me and you. Just to kind of feel me out. If you don't like it, I'm so sorry. But yeah, I feel like it's one of those moments I want to share with you. I will answer a couple of questions that I get asked all the time. I'm Latino. I grew up born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. I grew up with women mostly. 4 older sisters, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, and a younger brother. So it was a lot of us fighting for attention, but guess who got the most of it? I got my teeth done in Mexico. No, I did not line my lips. This is just natural. Fat that sounds little. Yes, my eyes are colored. They're mine. They're hazel. Let me see. Okay, so I think also I have my coffee. This podcast is sponsored by Magia Coffee, but what they did is they decided to make a coffee. So I'm gonna put it on here, and they made a cup also, so you can get K-cups, you can get the bag, you get personalized coffees. So I'm just really excited. Not personalized, but individual packets. So I'm really excited. I'm grateful. Use the discount code JoseNahuan15 because I get a little commission, and that's how I'm going to save my money to move to LA. Yes, if you're seeing this, I'm going to go to LA pretty soon, October 14th, and I will do a meet and greet. I'll put all that information on my Facebook and Instagram. So follow me over there, Jose Nahuan, in all my platforms. Okay, so now let's start with the spooky stuff. I'm going to read it all here. I am going to say their names because I think they did give me permission. Yeah, they gave me permission to use their name. One of them is from Joy Lynn. It's a very short one, but sweet and to the point. So she says, I have a haunted story. We lived in a house in Houston, and the landlord didn't ask for a deposit for the first month's rent. Girl, you should have known that should have been your first red flag. Because we all know every landlord wants first and last month's deposit. So she said, we thought it was a good deal. So days later, we would have so many black birds all over the yards. I've never heard of that before. I've seen it on TV, but I've never heard it. I didn't think anything of it. So more days went by. Our whole family would fight to get would get physically violent. Oh, that's ugly. And then the vibe in the house was so ugly. My husband and I had been drinking, and we went into a bathroom to argue without the kids knowing. All of a sudden, she says, all of a sudden, the bathroom sink turned on. And we looked at each other, and we tried not to think about it. I guess she says, I was in denial. We only lived there in my house for like 6 months, but the last straw was in my daughter's bedroom. I would always catch my daughter's mattress, and this is a little weird. She says, I caught my daughter's mattress. It sat straight up against the wall on her mirror, and the mirror was written, it looked like it in lotion. It was written, I'm dead. She said, that's it. I lost it. Sis, I would have lost it too, honey. I ended up walking to a church to get holy water to get rid of the evil spirits, to leave. And I wrote a status on Facebook on how to bless a house. And we did what we was told, but it opened all the windows and doors and sprinkled the water. It didn't work, but the rent was so cheap. And she puts LOL. There was one more thing, and she forgot to mention. But the same bedroom, my daughter had a rosary on her dresser. She goes, and my husband recorded this. It was moving from the dresser to the floor, but we no longer have the video. The sentence, she wraps this up, and I love her, but it kind of gets a little convoluted because she doesn't separate the sentences and so forth. But I understand she's trying to get it all out. I've had moments like that where, because what you don't know is that I'm a flight attendant. And a lot of the time we stay in hotels and layovers. And that's another question I get asked all the time is, do we pay for your own hotels? No, people. If you're a flight attendant, the company pays for it. Why would I pay for my own hotel if I'm working? Honey, that wouldn't make any sense. So one night I was by myself, and I a lot of people know this, but online, at least they know this, is that I like my rooms dark. Dark. I don't like any light seeping through. I unplug the 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 clock on the wall because I don't like the light coming in. Or even the door, the main door, I'll cover that with a towel because I want it really pitch black. That's how I sleep. Well, one night I was laying in bed, covered up. It was middle of the night. I was so tired. You know how you always hear people say, I can feel something watching me? I had never really realized it until that night. So I was asleep, and in the middle of my sleep, something told me, wake up, wake up. And so I was like, what? So I get up and I shoot out. I mean, I shoot straight up on my back, and I'm like this. And I'm looking at, like, my eyes are trying to adjust to the dark, and also trying to make out if there's anything, a silhouette, anything of that sort. There wasn't anything that I could see. And yes, I could go right back to bed because that's how I am. But as I shot up straight up, I was trying to make it out because it felt weird a little. There wasn't a smell, there wasn't anything like that, but it felt weird. And it felt weird at where my feet lay. Excuse me. And I swear I stayed looking there for a good few minutes, but nothing came to it. And I was like, okay, I don't really see anything. And as I was awake, I didn't feel anything, if that made sense. If I felt something, I would have turned on all the lights and be like, let me look again, because you have to look at the rooms. But I didn't see anything, so I was like, I'm just gonna go back to bed. Knocked it right out, didn't think anything twice. So it is what it is. I'll tell you more stories that I went through later on. I'm gonna give you a couple breaks in between. She says, this one's from Teresa. She says Teresa, but I've never heard Teresa. I've heard Teresa, but not Teresa. Or Teresa. Maybe it's Teresa. She says, here's my spooky story. When I was 8 months pregnant, my husband and I moved into a new apartment since we needed a 2-bedroom with my baby coming. We were surprised when the 2 women sitting on the sofa sat quietly while the building manager showed us the apartment. When I asked them why they were leaving their beautiful apartment, they just looked scared and said nothing. I'm assuming she means the 2 ladies. Immediately after my son's birth, weird things started to happen. We would hear weird whisperings over the baby monitor, and when we would walk into the room, it would stop. Things quietly escalated. One day, while my son was taking a nap next to me on the bed, I was resting. I was resting but awake, if that makes sense. I heard the front door open and the footsteps walking toward my bedroom door. I called out to my husband, babe, babe. The front door opened and the footsteps walking towards it. She said, thinking she was thinking it was him, and quickly realized that it sounded like heavy boots walking towards my room. Realizing it was not him, I attempted to get up to close my bedroom door to lock it, but I could not move. So I began praying, and the footsteps stopped at my door. My door flew open, but nothing came in. When I was able to move, I checked the apartment and there was no one there. My husband was skeptical. Whoa, I can't stand when somebody can't believe you. Skeptical. Sorry, I lost my place. He didn't believe in the paranormal, but soon started experiencing things he could not explain. At 3 a.m., we all know that's the witching hour, honey. Several times a week, cars and fire trucks would just go off, or electrical toys would begin to play music. It happened so much that my husband decided to take the batteries out of the fire trucks, only to have the sirens go off without the batteries. I've seen this before in stories, and that sends me chills up my spine, because I'm like, how do you explain that? How do you explain noises coming from a toy that doesn't have batteries? During the day, cars would move across the floor on their own. I'm assuming she means the car toys. Their own, and my son would run to us to hide his face as he was seeing something that made him afraid. One of the creepiest things that he heard on the monitor was a big bird that was given to my son as a gift. The big bird had a different modes of play, like clapping his hands, and then it would cause him to sing patty cake, covering his eyes, and his hands would over the monitor. Sorry, I'm losing my place. Let me read that. The big bird had different modes of play, like clapping his hands would cause him to sing that patty cake, and covering his eyes, his hands would cause him to say peekaboo. When he was taking a nap, we could hear Big Bird say peekaboo, peekaboo over the monitor, and it would sing patty cake in the middle of the night, despite being high on the high on the shelf in the room. One night, everything came to the head when I heard him cry over the monitor in the middle of the night. As I was walking down the long hall to his room, I saw him standing up in his crib and started talking to him, saying, "Baby, what are you doing awake?" I saw him look down, and I thought maybe he just dropped his bottle, so I asked, while I was still walking closer, "What are you looking at?" And he looked down, and I followed his stare, only to see that my son was fast asleep. That's creepy. And the baby standing up in the crib wasn't my son. That gave me goosebumps. I screamed, which startled the baby, and the baby turned into a beam of light and then shot towards the ceiling and disappeared. The next day, my son was attempting to walk on his own and was pushed aggressively on the floor. We moved out immediately. Out of curiosity, I have since gone back to the apartment, which has remained empty for years. Sis. So I remember hearing a podcast where it was a scary story like this. Someone wrote it in, and she said she went through an experience where it was similar to this, where things started getting spooky, they started hearing things, they started seeing things, and then realized that there was like an attachment to her, because she said, we moved out because we couldn't handle it anymore, but she said, I would dream about the house. She says, I couldn't take, like, years would pass by, but every single time I would think about it, she says that I would have to drive by just to get it out of my system. She says, but when I was there, I wanted to go inside the house. She says, but I didn't, because I realized, like, no, I think that would stir up something that I didn't want to stir up. I think there was like an attachment to her, because she said she could not let this house go. She would have to go over and over and over until she was like, look, I need to get help. And whatever help she did, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a weird attachment. I think it's easier said than done to say, oh no, girl, you better let that go, honey. But to me, it's creepy. I, ugh, I can't even imagine watching your baby, thinking it's your baby, looking down, coming back up and realizing that's not my child, shooting up. Oh my, pushing a child of my, I don't have a child, but can you imagine being a baby trying to walk and being pushed down, aggressive? No, I would have moved out, left everything, honey. You know what? That belongs to you. I don't need any of those. Keep the baby items. Keep all that. Keep my favorite shoes. I don't need it, honey. I would have moved back out. No. So here's another one. Another one from Anonymous. It says, these stories go straight to it. I love it. She says, one night, my friends and I were wanting to meet up. We didn't have anywhere much to go. She says, we didn't have anything to do. She says, so we decided to hang out. She goes, and we wanted to go to a spooky house. Of course, who hasn't done this? She says, so we decided to go to this one spooky house. We all said, why don't we meet up at 8 o'clock? Decent hour. It's not too dark. At least where I am. I'll be like, 8 o'clock, that's good. That's still a little daylight. She said, so we decided to go and meet up at 8 o'clock. She goes, well, most of them, she said, had and could not. You know what? I know this story. I'm not even going to read it. I'm having difficulty reading today. But I know this story because I had already read it just right before. She said that they were wanting to meet up. She said a few of them couldn't make it on time. I guess this is the time later on in the story. She says that it wasn't during the time of cell phones. She says, so most of them were going to be late, and I guess they called each other. They had called her, didn't get a hold of her because she had already left to go to the house. She said she walked up to the door and looked around and was like, where's everybody at? So she just knocked, thinking, oh, maybe they're in there. I guess it was an abandoned house, is what I'm making out of the story, is that it was an abandoned house. She says she knocks, waits, pauses, doesn't hear anything. She knocks again. She asks, like, hey, I'm going to say Tommy because I'm going to change his name. She's like, hey, Tommy, anyone here? She says, I walked around the house. I didn't see anything. So I just waited. She says, until a few minutes passed by. I was waiting on the porch, she said. And then I heard, hey, we're back here. She says, these fuckers. I guess they were trying to play a good joke on her. But she had waited long enough out there that they were like, okay, we're back here. And she's like, where? She's all, we're back here. So she turns the knob on the door and she notices she can walk in. And she's like, you think you're funny? The house still was dark, she said, as she was walking into it. Because she said there was light coming in, but it wasn't a lot of light. But it was still kind of dark. So she's like, I don't see you guys. She goes, we're back here. She said the tone sounded almost the exact same. There was like no inflection. She said, but I noticed that the third one, it did change. The tone did change a little bit. And more like irritated. So she was like, oh, okay, they are back there. She says, well, where? And she's making a room. She said she sees the living room at first. And then it's this long hall. And I guess she said the straight bedroom in the very back. She said it's just this one long hall. You see the restroom. She goes up to it. There's no one in there. She said it's starting to smell mildewy and dirty and, like an old house. It's been abandoned for quite some time. So I'm assuming there's dirt and dust and all that good stuff. So she's saying, hey, Tommy, Janie, Ralph. No one's responding. She says the closer that it's getting to the room, the room's getting darker and darker. She says the hall's getting darker and darker. And she didn't bring a, flashlight. She didn't think she needed one. She was like, guys, if you're playing with me, this is not funny. She's making those kind of comments. I would do the exact same thing. She says, I turned the knob because I'm scared. She goes, but I don't want to turn it because I feel like they're going to jump out at me. She says, I turned the knob, I opened the door, and the room's really dark. She said, it's so dark that my eyes are trying to adjust. She says, there's a window, but light is not coming through. She said, I'm not walking in. I know you're trying to scare me. She goes, even though I was about to take a step foot, she goes, like a foot inside the room, is when she heard the front door turn. And she turns because she's like, whoa. And it's her friends. Her friends are like messing with it and fiddling with it. They finally get the door open. They're like, hey, they don't know she's in there. And she screams. She's like, ah! She's all, you think you're funny? Because she's upset. Because she's assuming that they went through the back and went through the front. They went out that way and came through the front just to scare her. And they're like, they're scaring each other. She screams, they scream. And she's all, what are you doing in there? And she said, what do you mean, what am I doing in there? I know what you're doing. You're trying to scare me. And they said, what do you mean? She said, you told me to come in here. I know you tried to scare me and you came through the back. And they said, no, we just all got here. We were trying to call you to tell you we're going to be late, but no, we all just got like at the same time said, no, we promise we're not kidding. We just got here. She says, no, I heard you. I heard you tell me I'm back here. I'm back here. And she said, whose voice did you hear? She said, Tommy's? And they're like, Tommy's like, they said, no, Tommy's been with us the entire time. There's no way. So she said, we got scared and we all talked about it outside. She said, they walked outside and said, should we stay? And they said, well, come on, it can't be anything different. Of course, there's always a skeptic. And he says, no, it can't be anything really. Let's just do it. They ended up staying. And of course, the girl that was there, she was like, I kind of want to leave. She should have left, honey. I would have left. She said, I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to look like a wimp in front of my friends. Girl, I would have left. I would have been like, that's enough for me. You heard a voice that wasn't supposed to be there. And you heard it back there. And you heard it 3 times. No, mija. No, man. So she said, we ended up staying there just for a few hours. She said, one of us decided to bring a Ouija board. People, don't play with the Ouija board. Have I done it in the past? Yes. Have I let, did it tell me like things? Absolutely. But never again will I play with that. Because I just don't, I think it's like you're asking for something that you don't know what you're playing with. And you're asking for something, you're opening up a portal, I think, to something that shouldn't be welcomed. So, back to the story, she says, we sat down in the living room and it got a little dark. Nobody brought candles or anything. She goes, so it started getting darker and darker. And she said, but enough to where we could still see each other in the front living room. She goes, we could see each other. She said, but one of us took out the Ouija board and said, let's play. Of course. So they all started playing. Nothing happened at first. She said, we tried it again. Nothing happened at first. Again. She said, until one of my friends said, why don't we try to talk to somebody like a family member that passed? Well, she said one of the friends had a grandma that had just passed. And she was like, well, I wouldn't mind calling my grandmother. And she's like, so they said, well, what's her name? And so they started doing it. And she goes, for a few seconds, nothing was happening. And then the planchette started moving. And of course they started accusing, who's moving it? Who's moving it? Who's moving it? She said, maybe it's your, one of them said, well, maybe it's your grandmother. So of course the poor little girl was like, whoa, Grandma, is this you? And it moved to yes. Are you okay? And she saw yes. It moves again. She said, Grandma, I'm sorry I didn't tell you I love you. I should have told you. And you could tell that in the story, the poor little girl was feeling really heartbroken about it. She says, I'm so sorry. I wish I was there to tell you. And she starts crying. It starts getting too heavy. She moves her finger. She's like, I can't do this again. I can't do this. She's this is too much. She walks away to go outside, and they're like, well, we can't end this. We got to close it up first before anything. So they tell the grandmother, thank you so much for your time. We're going to go. So they say goodbye to it. So some of them walk up there. Of course, not all of them, but of course one of her friends walks up there, and I think it's a group of 4. So it's like 2 guys, 2 girls. Yeah, 2 guys, 2 girls. One of the other girl goes up there and she starts consoling her. Hey, are you okay? The girl's like, yeah, I'm fine. It was too much for me. It's too soon. And I thought I could handle it, but I can't. She's all, it's okay. We can leave if you want. She's all, no, we'll hang out for a little bit more. She said they both walked back into the house. As they were in the living room, I guess they were deciding, hey, what do you want to do next? Let's go somewhere else. Is when they heard a footstep. And they're like, who's back there? And they heard it from the same room that the first friend was in. She said, I know good and ready that it was back there. She didn't say good and ready, but that's my words. She says, I know I heard the footsteps back there. She goes, and it was heavy, kind of like the footstep that this other story was talking about. She said they all started getting scared. And one of the guys was like, of course, there's always one. I'm not scared. I'm going to go check. He said he walked back there, didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. He said, well, he turned around and started walking, saying, see, guys, there's nothing to it. I guess he's wearing a hoodie. Well, I'll say that's Sonny. Sonny's wearing a hoodie. He's walking out. I'm sorry, Tommy, because that's the guy that I said. Tommy's walking out, and he goes, I'm wearing a hoodie, and the back part of it gets pulled. He says, not enough to pull me down, but enough to get my attention. And he's like, oh! And they're like, what? They start yelling, what happened? And some of the girls are, of course, I think one of the girls said, I know you're messing with us. You're just messing with us. Tommy, stop playing. Tommy's like, I'm not. Something pulled my hoodie. And he starts making his way all the way to the front. So, of course, one of them didn't hesitate, turn around and start opening that door. But then now they're trying to jiggle the door, and the door's not caving in. They cannot open the door. She said it was jammed. Like, we turned it, pulled, and nothing. She said, we tried opening it so much. She goes, we could not. She said, I didn't see another door. In all the house, she goes, in everything that we were looking at, we didn't see another door. She says, there could have been another door, we never saw it. She says, she goes, all you started feeling was this heavy feeling coming from that room. She said, and then this smell. She said, it smelled like a dead animal. She says, she goes, as we were trying to mess with the door, trying to open it, we all started one by one, trying to see if we can open it. Pulled, she goes, we even had our foot on the wall. She said, somebody was like, ew, it stinks, it smells. And then you heard the running of those same footsteps running from that back room all the way to the front. She said, it gives me goosebumps. She says, we can feel, like, it's almost like you can feel the whip, like the gush of air, kind of. She says, it wasn't like in the movies, like, whew. She's all, it moves so fast. She goes, no, but you can feel, like, when somebody's walking by you and she says you can feel a little bit of that air. She said, or like when the car pushes back or drives by you and it pushes a little bit. She said it's something like that. She said we screamed. We screamed for what she said seemed like minutes. It felt like almost hours. We could not get that door open. She said we finally, I mean, she goes, I don't know what happened, but as soon as that smell went away and the footsteps stopped, because she said, I think it went on for like seconds. She said, but as soon as it stopped, they were able to open the door. They opened it. They all ran out. She said, I wish the story ended there. We all went to our homes. We got there. We were scared. The next day, they kind of talked about it. And they asked, like, is everybody okay? You know, that was scary. Wrapping up, summarizing what happened. Well, Tommy, the one that had his hoodie pulled, he said, I didn't want to tell you, but last night, while I was laying in bed, he said, it must have been later in that night. He said, it was like 4 a.m. He said, the only reason I knew that is because he had a clock by his dresser. He said, I look at it. I just woke up. He goes, my eyes woke up. I guess I woke up. He goes, I couldn't sleep. He goes, it did scare me. He said, I happened to turn in the corner and I saw 2 red eyes staring directly at me. He said, I screamed. He goes, I didn't want to scream, but that's my initial reaction. He goes, I screamed. And nobody woke up in the house. He saw my brother didn't wake up. My mom, my dad didn't wake up. He goes, no one woke up. He goes, I know I was screaming. He goes, I was screaming because everything was coming out of it. He goes, I could feel the veins like from my neck. That's how hard I was screaming. He goes, because I was like, when you grab to kind of control your voice, but you're screaming. He goes, I grabbed, I could feel it. He said, the eyes looked like they were moving slower and slower to him. He said, finally, he said, my yells were heard. He goes, I swear, he goes, I wish I was lying. He's all, but finally, my dad came into the room. He's all, what's going on? What's going on? He says that eyes disappeared. He says, because I turned to look at my dad and I was like, Dad, there's eyes. He says, there's eyes. And the dad's like, where? He turns on the light, flicks it, looks at the closet, looks at everything, goes, there's nobody here. The window's closed. He's all, what's going on? He's all, Dad, there's eyes right there staring at me. He's all, it's just your eye. He goes, you're just sleeping. He's all, of course, parents, I can't stand when they do this. He's all, there's nothing there. Calm down, relax, just go back to bed. You're fine. Dismissing the entire thing. He's like, I know what I saw. Tommy's like, did you guys see anything? Did you guys feel anything? He said, most of them said, no, we didn't hear anything. We didn't see anything. He said, but Tommy started feeling it. He said, fast forward to about, I think it was 10 to 15 years later. I can't remember the number she said. 10 to 15 years later, they were already adults. He said, Tommy could not let it go. Tommy said that he tried everything. He tried using holy water. He tried, going to church more often. He said nothing was working. He said it was getting worse and worse. He ended up drinking his way through it. And then eventually Tommy unalived himself. She said it was the worst and the most heartbreaking thing. She goes, I won't ever play with the Ouija and I won't ever do that again. She said, it's not like she goes, we were affected because of what happened to Tommy. Remember, I changed his name, so don't think that that's his real name. She said, but she said, you could see the turmoil on what was going on with Tommy because of the way it was affecting his life. She goes, I saw him one time in the future, because she said, fast forward before he took his life. She said, he told her, I still can't sleep. I still can't sleep. And she was like, are you from that same night? He said, yes. Is it getting worse? He goes, yes. I'm getting scratches. She said, I hear voices. And she said Tommy had never heard, she said Tommy had never had anything in his family where they had mental health issues. One time, I think the dad, she said, went to take him to a doctor to see if anything was wrong with him, and they said no. But he said, I could hear the voices. I could hear them telling me to do something to myself. And she said, I was scared. She goes, I didn't know how to help him. I tried telling him, you maybe going to church, maybe holy water, maybe praying more. And he's like, I've tried it all and it's not working. And she said, I can see it in the way it was carrying on his face. She said that it weighed so much on his face that he looked older than what he was. She goes, he wasn't well kept like he used to be. He didn't care about anything anymore. She said, there's a sofa right across this sofa, and the pillow fell. So I was like, sorry. But she said after that day, I never talked to Tommy again. But she said when she went to the funeral and so forth, she knew that day she could have done something else. She doesn't know what she could have done. I don't know if she could have done anything really for him. She says, but I feel like for sure that had to do something with it. She said, he didn't really talk to me that much after that. He avoided me, didn't respond anymore, didn't call me, didn't do anything. Tried visiting, she said, and he just wouldn't want to see me. She said, so I could tell that it weighed on her, because at the end of the story, you could tell that she still carries that. But what a weird and scary story. What a heartbreaking story. This is why don't play with the Ouija. I don't recommend doing any of that. If it's not your house, stay out of it, honey. Sometimes if you're looking for trouble, you're gonna find it. But yes, that was the stories that I wanted to share with you today. I had already read that one over and over, so I didn't feel like I needed to read that one, because that one, girl, was engraved in me, honey. That was a good one. I held on to that one because I was like, I don't think people want me to tell them scary stories or tell them any stories if it's just me. But sometimes I don't have interviews, so I feel like I can tell you these stories that I've already read online or people are sending to me. If you want to send me your own personal story, let me know. Send it to josenotjuan0@gmail.com and I'll read it here. Let me know if you wanted me to share your names, and if not, I won't say the names, but please write to me. Let me know. Thank you again. Thank you for everything again. Dame a besito because I gotta go. Hopefully that was spooky in the night. I love you. Bye. Bye.